Welcome to the Pitch to Profit podcast. I'm your host, Oliver Keane. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. He is a lifelong Manchester United fan, a former professional footballer for Manchester United and Exeter City, a sports academic for 22 years, including a PhD in sports psychology, published author of the book From Red to Read, the story of Fergie's first fledgling, an Exeter City commentator for BBC Radio Devon Sport, and a senior lecturer in football and research at UCFB. Welcome to Dr. Alan Tonge. Alan, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Yeah, not so bad, Ollie. Thank you. Thanks for the invite. Looking forward to it. It's always good to share a bit of football knowledge and talk a little bit about football for a spell. So yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
No worries, my pleasure. Thank you for coming on, Alan. So on the Pitch to Profit podcast, for those who haven't watched before, we look at the behind the scenes of football with former players, commentators, media, employees within football, and find out a little bit of the details behind the game and also about the person who we're interviewing. So, Alan, just to get started, what's your background in football? I said you're a Man United fan. How did that come about?
Just like many people, Ollie, really, through my family. My dad was a Man United supporter, so you tend to get Christmas presents going right back into my youth. Football shirts and footballs, and I was playing football from as long as I can remember. My dad built some goal nets in the garden for me, and we were always playing out dramatic finishes, and used to be sort of like using imagery even back then. Last minute of cup finals or last minute of league seasons, and it was incredible. Ollie, Man United always seemed to get the last minute winner, and was playing the games and that in the garden. So great memories, and a lovely time and a lovely introduction to football through my dad.
Nothing more exciting than a last minute winner as well. Who was your favourite player growing up as a kid?
Well, broad range, really, Ollie. I think that because we had sort of quite a lot of football interest, I used to sort of enjoy watching the Euros and the World Cups and things like that. So I mean, going back quite a long time here, but players like the French midfielder called Michel Platini was I think he got involved in UEFA in quite a big way later on down his life, but he was an incredible talent. And from a Man United perspective, sort of coming through in the 80s, I used to enjoy watching lads like Brian Robson and Norman Whiteside. They were a couple of heroes of mine. So used to just sort of emulate, and that was sort of back in the days where cup finals were a bit different. Used to sort of have a massive build up on the day. It wasn't as commercialised, and then used to watch the cup final, and then dependent on the result and which way it went, you'd go out practicing in the street following that and try to replicate some of the goals that you've seen.
There was definitely more. It's interesting you say that. There was definitely more value in especially the FA Cup. I think my dad always said to me, and I never understood as a kid. He said I'd always rather Blues had won the FA Cup than the Premier League or the old First Division. I couldn't get that because obviously my time watching football, the Premier League or the Champions League was the big thing, but the FA Cup's got that history, hasn't it?
It has, and it used to be even exciting in the semi-finals, Ollie, because the semi-finals used to be played at neutral grounds back then. So if you'd done well, if your team had done well to progress through the cup rounds, you get a semi-final at Villa Park or Main Road, old City ground, and for me that created a little bit more, I suppose, specialness to it, because you knew that if you won your semi, you'd have a trip to Wembley. Whereas these days, obviously, if you get past the quarterfinals, semi-finals are at Wembley now. So for me, that took a little bit of a gloss off it. But I understand it's all for revenue and, like I say, commercial purposes now, but there was a little bit more magic, I think. And not to say that the FA Cup's lost its magic, it's still there, but maybe not as much as it used to be, in sort of my generations coming through the footballing system.
I agree. I think what gives a cup, the FA Cup or the League Cup, its magic as well, and we've started to see it again, which is nice in recent years, is clubs like Newcastle and Crystal Palace, respectively, winning it. When it's, I suppose this isn't a dig at them, but when it's a Manchester City and it's just another trophy for them, they're fourth or fifth of the season, I feel like sometimes that can make people feel it's devalued. But, Newcastle had won their first trophy in 70 years. Crystal Palace had won their first trophy ever. And it was the biggest thing for their clubs. And that made it feel really good afterwards.
Absolutely. And, that's what the Cup's all about. And we all love the underdog in a way that, it's FA Cup weekend this weekend. And no doubt we'll be keeping our eyes on sort of some of the lower teams that are in there pitched against some of the bigger teams, and hoping for a bit of excitement or a cup shock, and there'll be lots of games to follow from Friday, Saturday and Sunday this week. So be keeping an eye on that. Exeter got quite a big one. They're at home to Wickham, and it said it's all about getting through that second round, because if you do and you pull a big team in round 3, it can generate a lot of money for the club. And I think in this kind of like scenario where we are at the moment, I think Exeter could really do with that. So a big game for them on Saturday.
100%. Maybe our clubs will play against each other, Alan, Exeter and Birmingham, or Manchester United and Birmingham, maybe.
Absolutely, or Birmingham on the up. We spoke about this. They've got a good backers now, and they're heading in the right direction. Like you say, last week they just announced some incredible vision, incredible ground opportunities that's going to be coming soon. Create a lot of jobs, create like a park around the ground itself that will generate lots of opportunities for different people. So they're heading in the right direction. Yeah, doing the commentary last season at Birmingham was fantastic. Like a massive ground, packed in. And obviously with Jay Stansfield playing for Birmingham, obviously Exeter have got, great fond memories of him and his dad as well. And I don't know if it was at that game, or they unfurled like a big shirt in Exeter away end that had like number 9 Stansfield on it. So like incredible moment that. And it was brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Although Birmingham was the victors on that day, but they did well. They got promoted, haven't they, and got through into the Championship. And they're doing well in Championship as well. So, yes, sleeping giant.
It was amazing, actually, because I think it was at St James's Park and at St Andrews. The Exeter fans had the Adam Stansfield giant top that you're on about, the banner. And obviously Birmingham fans joined in and being respectful because, there's that mutual respect between the clubs through the Stansfields. And I think that is quite a nice thing. Definitely in football, something you don't see maybe all that time.
Absolutely, Ollie. And you got like, I know a couple of the guys who like James Vickery, who's like head of BBC Radio Devon Sport. He's got a couple of brothers who do a lot of brilliant work for the Adam Stansfield Foundation. And they've raised such a lot of money. And, it's just nice to see him doing well. Because he's like, I think Jay, when he arrived at Exeter, was like one of them special kind of tales that, like, it's like out of a fairy tale situation that, his dad is like such a legend at Exeter, and then like bringing his son on loan, it was incredible, and that was just sort of like an incredible moment. And then to sort of go back there, the Exeter fans will never forget the Stansfield, and he did brilliant. I think Jay on loan for us all, he did fantastic. A couple of seasons ago, like when he come, like they had a brilliant forward line and scored some great goals, and you could tell it was like a pedigree of a good player, and to join Birmingham, and I think they've got a really good chance maybe of pushing towards the Premier League. And I think Jay's got a really long contract there as well, hasn't he? So hopefully he probably will see some Premier League football over this next few seasons.
Well, he's got about a 7-year contract, I think, at the club, and he's into his first or second year. Second year this will be. And he said before the stadium was unveiled that his dad was a legend at a club, Exeter, obviously, and he wants to be a legend at this club. He unfortunately got stick because of the price tag that was associated with the transfer at the time. And sometimes you do see that, I think, in football in general, that a lot of pressure or, I suppose, dislike begins to build on a player because of the transfer fee associated with them. But, Jay's really put his head down, grafted, and, been playing really well for the club in both League One and now in the Championship. And I think that's a good thing to see, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm a great believer doing the basics well. Even if you've got a really big move, some players, they try to change, don't they, and change the style and change the game to suit the expectations. But for me, it's just like continue what you're doing. They paid a big fee for you for a reason, and that is for you to work hard, to close defenders down, to get on the ball when you can, and to get into the right areas. So just keep doing that as well as you can. And it wouldn't surprise me if he was maybe pushing for England places in the years to come. He's been in the under-21s, hasn't he? So that won't surprise me at all, because he seems like a bit like a Robbie Fowler type of player, Ollie. I mean, Robbie was a great centre forward from many years ago. He just seems like a natural goal scorer, Jay Stansfield. So, like I say, long may that continue.
100%. But you, Alan Tonge, have had your own career in football. So for our viewers to know this, Alan signed for Manchester United as a 14-year-old in January 1987 and holds the distinction of being Sir Alex Ferguson's first ever acquisition at the club. Prior to that, what's the build-up into you getting into football and starting to play it more and more?
Yeah, just like a lot of young players, really. I was just like coming through the grassroots system. Like I say, that's 1987. That seems a long time ago, doesn't it? Really. But yeah, just following a journey of enjoying my football in the grassroots teams that I played in, and then just kind of going up levels. I played for Bolton Schoolboys, Greater Manchester County, and like a lot of young footballers, used to get like scouts coming watching the games, and I got invited down to Man United. I went to a few clubs. I was at Bolton for a bit. I was at Man City for a bit, and I got offers from different clubs to sign for them. But because we were kind of a United supporting family, I think when United come knocking, and I started to get involved with them a little bit more and started to play in their junior teams, and they offered me schoolboy forms, and then they said that I could join as an apprentice after my schooling had finished. That was a really tempting offer, and that's where I kind of headed after I'd finished my GCSEs. I looked straight into the apprenticeship, but it was a bit different back then to what it is now. Dear me, it's poles apart. I think not necessarily in a bad way, because I think I got taught a lot of good lessons, but the culture of football was quite harsh and ruthless, especially from an apprentice's perspective. We weren't on the most enormous of wages back then. My first year as a YTS at United, I was on £28.50 a week. And
wow. when
you add up all the hours that you put in, it worked out about 47p an hour or something. So probably slave labour in a way, but it was an opportunity for me to cut my teeth and shape myself in a way that, even though it was tough at the time, you don't realise maybe how much that toughness kind of pays off for you later on down your life. So that was my entry into full-time football, starting as an apprentice at one of the biggest clubs around.
And maybe you don't realise until later on in life as well, and how much football's changed, how tough it was back then, the climate of football, because at the time that was, I suppose, the norm for football and players who were going into the youth teams back then. So, it must have been a dream come true, though, signing for your boyhood club, Man United.
Oh, mate, amazing. Even trained at the place called The Cliff back then. That was Man United's old training ground. And got the opportunity to play with some good players, train with some good players. We used to sort of, like I say, play in the junior team. So how it worked, back then, you had like four sides. Like the B team was kind of for schoolboys, under 18 players. The A team was open age. That was kind of your next step up. And then that led into the reserve side, and then into the first team if you was good enough. So it was just trying to navigate the different levels, but very competitive. There's that argument, isn't there, about, is it about winning, is it about development? And I played under a youth coach called Eric Harrison, who was kind of the sort of the famed coach of who brought the class of '92 through. Right. And he was a tough man, Eric, and he didn't stand any messing about. And even if it was like under 12 snakes and ladders competition against Liverpool, he'd want you to win that. So it was like there was development, but there was we need to win and get used to that kind of winning feeling as well. So it was quite interesting, and it was quite a big step up. I think probably going in as a 16-year-old, and it was only a few years ago that I'd have like posters on my walls of like Man United squads and Mark Hughes and Norman Whiteside and Matt Brian Robson, and then go in at 16 and you're sort of like in the same building as them, and training with them on occasions. It was a bit surreal, but it was an interesting time. Ollie, and like I say, something that I look back on with a lot of fondness.
And it's great to, although it may be tough at the time sometimes, it's great to have a coach like that who just does want to win, because sometimes that high pressure environment can help you develop into a better player, maybe because you're dealing with more challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, because you're only very young, you don't really understand about, people driving you and people, having a go at times. And they say it's for your own good, but as a young kid, wide-eyed kid, you don't really get that, because you're not really. I think in the region of 16 to 19, you're still a little bit emotionally vulnerable, a bit emotionally immature, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you don't really see the true. You don't really see the true value of the lessons till you kind of, you maybe move on in your different ways and your different paths that you take in your own life. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. That people. I say it to students, demand more of yourself at times. Don't be going through this kind of like lackluster, demotivated, underachieving sort of path that because you're not putting your full potential and your full efforts in. And I think from that, I think demanding more of myself as I kind of went on through my life. I think a few good lessons were learned at Man United, definitely.
It's such a key thing as well to be demanding of yourself. Part of this podcast is, we try to give some insight into the business of football. It's a tough industry to break into, and there's a lot of people who do want to go into it. And I think you just got to keep trying and keep finding new ways that you can develop yourself and also gain connections, maybe, and work on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've summed that up well. I think it's about look at the figures. The data's ridiculous, isn't it? To play in the Premier League as a young player coming through into first, it's like there's that famous percentage at 0.012%. And I think I read somewhere that only less than 1% become a professional player out of all the players in the system. So it's quite an achievement to play in a first team, I think, and get there. And I think that's a tough journey for many. You need a bit of luck, of course. I think you need opportunities. You need someone to believe in you. You need someone to give you that chance. And lots of people, unfortunately, it doesn't arrive. And that's why I think, Ollie, even back then at United, coming through my apprenticeship, I still had one eye on my education. Like a lot didn't. A lot took their eye off the ball. Because I was reasonable. I did reasonably well in school. I wasn't a high flyer academically, but I wasn't struggling either. I was kind of sat somewhere in the middle. So I wasn't at the front of the class getting 100% in maths tests. Yeah. It's like you look at this and you think you're a genius. So I wasn't at the back of the class either, who wanted to burn the school down. So I didn't fit into any of those two. I was sat in the middle, really. So when I did my GCSEs, because you got a certain amount of A to C's, as it were back then, I got an opportunity to do a BTEC. If you didn't get A to C's, 5 or above, you got sent to do a college course like an NVQ. And by the sounds of it, listening to some of the stories of the apprentices, it sounded like organised chaos, the NVQ. It was just like, we'll turn up in college for half an hour and then we'll go play pool for the rest of it. I don't think a lot of the players took that seriously, but I'm a great advocate of that. Even though you're following a professional football journey, you should have other strings to your bow, if that makes sense.
100%. And I think a lot of clubs nowadays, especially at the higher end, the top 4 divisions, they do put that emphasis on the younger players getting educated as well, and maybe there's that support system afterwards as well if they don't make it as a player, which back when you were coming through as a youth, as you just alluded to, you yourself had that kind of eye on education, but there wasn't maybe the club saying you got to get this done. That was kind of just your own understanding that maybe things might not work out, because that can happen.
Yeah, I think when I finished at United, I had a BTEC. I got that, but that kind of got put on hold for a bit, if that makes sense, while I tried to sort of do something else. Because I left United, and then eventually I ended up at Exeter City, and I got a bad injury. So for a few years, I kind of done my education, but then kind of gone into almost this full-blown, full professional football identity. My education had kind of, the handbrake had been put on it, because when I arrived at Exeter, I wasn't really following anything else. So that was kept on hold, and I think when I sort of come out of football with a really bad injury, it was a bit of a funny time for a spell, because, you know, like a lot of footballers, you're not qualified in anything else, or you're not like, you know, you can't just sort of leave football and think, oh, I'll become a lawyer, I'll become a teacher, I'll become, you know, there's steps to that. You've got to get a degree, you've got to go to teacher training for 12 months, and I think it was kind of like coming out of Exeter was like a tough time for you, because obviously I didn't know what to do, so I kind of had to go backwards to go forwards, if that makes sense. So I think what my point is here is that BTEC that I got at United, that gave me a passport into a degree.
Yeah.
So if I'd have messed about all at United and not bothered with my education, I wouldn't have had that passport to get into university, because, you know, they just would have said, well, you're going to have to restart, do your GCSEs again, and go on an even longer path if you wanted to, you know, become a teacher or something like that. So yeah, that was kind of like sort of sticking to my principles and getting a qualification behind me, even though it was challenging at the time, because you used to get like a bit of Mickey taken out of you, like, because you're sort of reading books and, you know, you were doing a little bit of getting your head down at college. You used to get a bit of banter about that, like you're a swot, or even from the coaching staff, they used to say, like, I remember like Eric said to me, like, how many GCSEs have you got? A to C. So I said to him, like, 5, and he went, what you doing here? You know, in football, like, you know, well, yeah, I'm trying to follow a football career. So even back then, I think my point is, education and football didn't really mix.
Yeah.
Now, as we've propelled football into the future, I think they do now. Clubs are a lot more serious about it, because they understand that the attrition rates are so high. You know, it's very, very difficult to get a professional football career. So I think player care and coaches and people like managers in clubs, they do recognise now that players do need something else, because, you know, within football, your career could be over with a bad tackle. You could get released at the end of a contract and struggle to get a club. So you need other things, Ollie, on top of you pursuing your football journey.
And I think that's brilliant. I mean, you know, as you say, they do take it more seriously now, and you even see like not just people who necessarily can't make it professionally into football, but you've seen like the highest end players, like Vincent Kompany as an example. I know he was doing I believe a degree in the sciences of some sort when he was still playing at Manchester City, and obviously now he's the manager of Bayern Munich. But it's still that, you know, if he wanted to pursue something different, or if for some reason at the time his career had ended prematurely, he had something to fall back on. And I think that's a really interesting point. You were talking about, so just going back to your time at Man United, obviously you had Eric Harrison as your coach during the youth system, but did you get to meet and interact with Sir Alex Ferguson much after he became the manager of the club and acquired you into the youth team?
Not too much, Ollie, to be fair. He was obviously first team matters, and the only kind of time you'd see him is like, he used to be quite interested in the youth. I think when Sir Alex kind of arrived at Man United, United have always had like a sort of, going back to the Busby Babes in the 50s, a strong emphasis on youth development and, you know, try to bring their own players through. So within history, they've kind of been really hot at that at different times and really cold in some other parts. So he used to turn up at the youth team games on the sidelines, because how it used to work back then is the youth teams would kind of play in the morning, be all the A teams, and it wouldn't be uncommon for like you to look over and see Sir Alex and Archie Knox kind of stood on the side for the first half or something like that before they went over to Old Trafford for first team duties. And then what we used to do as well is, like, back then we used to sort of train with the first team on occasions. I think it's very separate now, even in training grounds, because the game's absolutely massive now. You have like academy buildings and first team buildings, but when we were playing like in the Cliff, yeah, everybody was in the same building, so it wouldn't be uncommon, Ollie, for on a Thursday morning, Friday morning, to come down onto the notice board and see a massive load of sheets on there with about 12, 15 five-a-side teams and everybody would just play like five-a-side on the cliff, and you'd have like pros in your team, you'd have youth, you'd have apprentices, you'd have like sort of players who are kind of early years pro, about 19, 20, 21 years old, like all mixed together, playing like five-a-side competition. So I know like one of my old colleagues who's like a big coach in the FA, like Paul McGuinness, he was at UCFB not long ago actually delivering a session. He's a really big advocate of mixed age play because he says that if you're, say, coming through as a young lad like 7, 8, 9 and you're playing with 12, 13, 14-year-olds, you learn things very quickly, like to manoeuvre the ball quickly, because if you don't, you'll get the ball took off you. So mixed age play, I think, is a really important concept as part of youth development, and that's something that United really, really believed in. So I think in my early journey, Ollie, I played in an under-18s team when I was 15 years old. So there's a little picture of me on that, and like you can see me, it's like so underdeveloped. I'll show you that when I see you again.
Yeah.
And you look at that, and you've got all these kind of players who are like 2 or 3 years older on you. It's like me on the end, and you think you can spot like the 15-year-old. I played in the reserves at 16, so that was quite rare back then because the reserve side played in something called the Central League. So what had happened, Ollie, is I thought if you didn't play in United's first team, they'd drop players into the reserve to give them game minutes.
Yeah.
So you could be playing again. You could be playing with Paul McGrath, Gordon Strachan, Brian Robson if he was coming back from injury in the Central League. So that was really exciting. And then I played in a first team friendly at 17. And one of the things that somebody told me once, like, unfortunately, friendlies don't count as part of like United first team appearances. So you get like FA Cup, even things like the Virtue Trophy in the modern day. They all count as like first team appearances. Unfortunately, friendlies don't.
Yeah.
But if my appearance in that friendly that I played in would have counted, I would have been the 13th youngest player to play for Man United at 17 years and 61 days, I think it was, something like that. So if you slot my birth year in and you look at the sort of the list, I would have been 13th youngest. It's a shame it doesn't count, but that's the way it goes, isn't it? Never mind.
We'll count it. for now. But I think that's really interesting. I didn't know that about the five-a-side thing in particular, because obviously with how developed facilities are now, and you have your training ground, your academy training ground, and it's kind of all separated into categories and stuff. Sometimes I think maybe it's difficult for youth players to break in because they've kind of been so separated from the rest of the club, whereas when you're at Man United, and as you say, you're playing in a five-a-side, could be you at 15, a 9-year-old, and Brian Robson on a five-a-side team. It kind of connects the whole club together, I think, and it may make that transition for players who moving into the first team or moving into the higher youth team easier, I reckon.
Yeah. Well, I think if you obviously the modern setup, Ollie, as we know, it's like everything's age v age now, isn't it? Like the 12s will play the 12s, under 15s will play the under 15s, under 18s will play the under 18s, and then they've got like the under 21s league as well. But it's not really. It doesn't mirror competitive men's first team football now. I know now that they've tried to bring in, like the under 21s will enter the Virtue Trophy, but a lot of those games, or if you've been following them over this last sort of couple of months, is like usually the first team, like Swindon will beat United's under 21s like 4-1, or Peterborough will beat Chelsea under 21s 3-1, or it doesn't seem to be bringing any players on. So I know there's been a big argument, like, should we revert somehow to a more male, mature, competitive environment that you sort of doing that week in, week out? So you might play your Virtue Trophy games, and then you'll be back in the under 21s again, playing City under 21s or Chelsea under 21s. Players need to play at the best level they can to bring them on in the best way. So, I don't know if there's any kind of like meetings that the Premier League have or the FA where you can sort of like have a bit of a reform and a rethink again about youth development in football. But that's kind of something that has been talked about. Certainly the sort of the older fans that I speak to, like, they really enjoyed the Central League because you'd have like a mix of youth players with like first team players, and it helped you. You could get sort of like experience of like observing a first team, like what they did, how they prepared, how they spoke to each other, what the communication skills were like. So to play in like a sort of similar team to that would be amazing. I remember my reserve team debut going back a long time here. We beat West Brom reserve 7-1 on Old Trafford. And within that team that day, when you look at the team, so like Paul McGrath played centre half. I think Clayton Blackmore, he was a really good player. He turned out. We had Gordon Strachan playing. And it's like you come in and like you're around these players, and it's like you've got to be switched on. You've got to get your touch right. You've got to get your passing right. So it brings you on as well. It really tightens your game up. So maybe reverting to something like that. But there's a lot more money in football now, and first team managers don't want to risk players getting injured in games where you might need them for the first team squad. And another big thing that's changed, Ollie, of course, is the size of the squads now. Like when I was coming through the system in the late 80s, early 90s, when we had 2 substitutes, you've got like 7, 8 and 9 subs on the bench now for certain competitions.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you need massive squads now, don't you? And,
I think it could be interesting changing that youth development to bring in a mix with more senior players, because what you're seeing right now, and you talk about the fact there's more money in football now as well, is obviously clubs are now favouring, especially at the highest level, to just transfer players in at the highest prices and bring them in if there's any issues. And maybe some clubs do better than others, but maybe there's a reluctance to bring through academy players into the side because you've got a lot of players who are associated with these high transfer fees, and you want them to succeed and them to do well. I mean, your own club, Man United, are famous for years for always having a Man United academy player being in that starting men's 11. I think recently you've got Kobe Mainoo is the one people think of, but in years past you've had several. The class of '92 you talk about as well. So maybe restructuring things could help do that more, but is it too far gone with the money?
Maybe. I think obviously a big difference these days as well is, like, as we know, football's like multi-global now, isn't it? It wasn't when I was kind of coming through the system. It was more UK players driven, if that makes sense. So like in your youth teams, you had like lads from Wales or Scotland or Ireland, and then dotted across the England, you'd have like lads from Newcastle or lads from down south, like London, playing in your youth team. So it was more of a UK focus, whereas now you sort of like accelerate that on 30, 35 years. It's just like incredibly multinational and multi-global now, isn't it? Which I suppose, Ollie, in a way makes it even harder for youth players to come through. It's not uncommon now to sit and watch the Premier League games on your telly on a Sunday, and there's not many English players involved, unfortunately. I think I was watching one, might have been last season. I don't think there was one English player involved. I think it was something like it might have been Arsenal v Chelsea or something, or Arsenal v Tottenham, like not even one English player. And thinking, wow, that's incredible. But even now, like you look at sort of some of the starting lineups, like English players are quite small in number. So I don't think it's impacted England in a lot of ways, because we've still done quite well in the major championships.
Yeah,
we've been to the kind of the Euros final, haven't we, twice, like lost to Italy, unfortunately, lost to Spain. We've gone quite deep in World Cups, but I think for youth players now, you've got to be incredibly talented, haven't you, to get an opportunity in a first team. You've got to be like almost like in the Premier League, you've got to be a future international player, haven't you? And, how tough is that to sort of come through? That's really difficult.
Yeah, because I think you're right. I think there is this sense that if if you're not good or you're not quite at the level that we want you to be, we will just transfer someone in who is. Because especially these clubs with the higher buying power, they can buy not just senior players, but you're seeing like I think that Endrick was 15 and he went to Real Madrid's youth set up and then put in the senior men's team or whatever. So you're seeing like young players getting brought into higher level clubs and then just forming part of their academy, and they didn't even develop them previously. So it is getting harder and harder and smaller percentage, unfortunately. I think you're right.
Yeah. It's like, we understand, everybody's after that diamond, aren't they, that's that's out there, that next big thing. You know, we thought it was going to be Garnacho at Man United. He sort of like broke through the youth team, won the FA Youth Cup, and you know, for me, looked a really good player in the games that he's played. But unfortunately, something's not quite worked out, and he's been moved on to Chelsea. So yeah, a bit disappointing there. But like you said, I think he was bought, wasn't he? I think he's about a 15-year-old or something. I'm not sure. I think it was a Spanish team he kind of came from. But yeah, disappointing because I thought he might have had like a really good future at United. But again, if you fall out with coaches or managers, I don't know what the backstory is. You know, they can't afford to have. You know, they can't afford to have like problems in dressing rooms. If you're causing a bit of ruckus or you're causing a bit of a stir that affects other people, and you've got to be moved on. And that's unfortunately what happened with him.
And sometimes it does happen, those departures from clubs. So you yourself, as we've established, you're at Man United for a few years in the youth setup. You know, you had those chances to play alongside your youth teammates, but also maybe occasionally some of the senior men's team like Paul McGrath and Brian Robson, etc. Eventually, you did sign a professional contract, but eventually a departure happens between you and Man United. Would you be able to talk me through that process, what that's like? Because not many people realise what that process of, you know, leaving the club is like.
Yeah, it was like a sort of, like you say, I got signed a year contract at United. Probably the worst contract you can sign with because you're under pressure straight away, aren't you, to sort of like have another good season. And I did okay. I played all right. We managed to win the A-team league, which is kind of like it's an open age league, but I think I don't know. I think the triggers used to get pulled quite quickly on some players. Like it's just the way it happens, and obviously there was no agents back then. So this was really late. This was about May, I got told. So I think players are getting told that probably pre-Christmas if you're not going to get like your contract renewed, so your agent can start putting feelers out for other sides. Anyway, we got to May, and then I got called up to see Fergie. And he sort of said, like, we're going to have to move you on. We're not going to renew your contract. And he said, we've got a couple of clubs that might are showing a bit of an interest in you because I've been playing a couple of games at Rezzies. And so I thought, well, at least that sounds all right. And then coming away from that, I was kind of heartbroken because, like, United's your club, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
you know, you've had some good experience on it, but you want more of them. You want, like, you know, to be pushing and trying to get into the first team. But unfortunately, that's the way it worked out, and it didn't happen like that. So I did. I found that incredibly challenging. There's a lot of good work in there. Still to this day, 35 years on, about players getting released and the aftercare and all that. But it definitely leaves a scar. I was talking to someone a couple of weeks ago about deselection, a lad called Dr. Chris Platts. He does a lot of work in this space. And I honestly feel, you know, like a snake sheds its skin and moves on to something else.
Yeah.
I honestly feel a piece of me died that day when I got told by United they were like moving me on. But sometimes your biggest disappointment can turn into your biggest positive in a way, because if I'd not had that experience, I would have never got a degree. I would have never got like a master's, a PhD. I would have never gone into teaching because I would have had a long football career. And then, you know, I would have never got to do some of the other things that I've managed to achieve and things like that in my life. So you look at taking that experience as kind of like, okay, it's disappointing, I'm gutted, I'm devastated, but life goes on, life moves on very quickly. And that's another thing about professional football. Remember Eric Harrison used to say, you know, no friends in football, or they're just acquaintances, they're just people that you play with.
Yeah.
As soon as you carry your boots outside for the last time at Man United and walk out the cliff gates, like not one person has like phoned you or checks if you're all right, or you just kind of left to get on with it. Now in the modern day, you get like probably people are checking in on you. You know, Crystal Palace have obviously started a 3-year aftercare scheme and stuff like that. But in our day, it's just like, you know, no one's bothered. Life moves on. You know, your teammates they've got to do what they need to do. And there was not one person who kind of rang and said, Are you all right? Can we help you with anything? Do you need any support with anything? And I even ended up having to phone. Ended up having to phone other managers to try and sort my own trials out at football clubs, And I remember ringing Alex Ferguson's secretary at United to say, "Has anybody have you heard anything? Has anybody sort of shown any interest that I can maybe go on, even if it was just a trial?" And she said, "Oh, he's in America at the moment. He won't be back for 6 weeks and all that and that." So you think you just kind of left to your own devices. And so that was the kind of the deselection process that I experienced. It was pretty harsh, pretty brutal, but that's the way it goes. You take your hits, don't you? You take your hits on the chin, and then you got to bounce back up again and try and move your life in another direction.
And
I think it was a famous writer. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and he said, "When you can no longer change your situation, you're challenged to change yourself." And I think that's what I had to do. I had to learn quickly, reflect, think about how it had gone wrong, and then take that fuel and try and move it on in another direction.
And thank you for being open about it as well, because it is a tough thing to deal with, especially back when you were playing. And as you said, as you just explained there, you don't have that support system. You're kind of left to your own devices to find either a new club, a new pathway in life, or whatever you may pursue, which we'll get onto. But it is that kind of, where do I go from here? And I think there is that extra sting as well if it is your boyhood club. Had it have been, you said really early on in the podcast, Man City showed interest. Had that have happened with Man City, you might be more, I didn't like them anyway, type of thing. But it's hard when it's, your own club it's associated on. But obviously, as you just mentioned, you wouldn't have had certain experiences and your life may have taken a completely different direction, including outside of football you mentioned, but also including in football. I can tell you've got a real fondness for Exeter because of your time there and what you do now, but you may not have ever had that experience in Exeter, in Devon, have gone a different way. So just going on to that, after, you said you called Sir Alex Ferguson's secretary and she kind of give you the "he's not here" type of thing. How'd you get on to, moving on to Exeter? What's the process there?
Yeah, it was when I was at United, the first year apprentice. I got picked to go and play in Russia I got a Football League representative cap, and it was a centenary year. It was 100 years of the Football League. So you're talking about 1988 here. It was the Football League formed in 1888, I think it was. And I managed to go and play in Moscow for a sort of I think it was an under-19 side, something like that. Anyway, I was captain. I captained the team on that occasion, and one of the managers of the party was a lad called Alan Ball, and Alan Ball was kind of one of the England World Cup winning players. So he had quite a big esteem, a high esteem in football. Had a great career. Played for some top clubs, Arsenal, Everton. Started his career off a bit like myself. Got sort of told by Bolton he was too small at 15, and he ended up going to Blackpool. And this is what you're saying about you're right, Ollie. To young players, never give up at times, because Ball, got told at 15 he was too small, and he won the World Cup at 21, like 5 years later. That's mad, isn't it? So he played for some big clubs, and he invited me down to Exeter on trial initially. He said, "I remember you playing in United's Resis." I said, "I've seen a couple of games, so obviously I remember you from the Russian trip." And that ended up in me getting securing a contract and managing to sort of stay at Exeter for a few seasons. So I rocked up in Exeter in 1991, and I didn't kind of leave Exeter to around I think it was about 95, end of 94, 95 season. And but I had about 3 or 4 seasons down there with the Grecians, and absolutely loved it down there. Made a lot of friends, lovely area. And I always laugh, Ollie. I never knew where Exeter was. That sounds horrible, that, doesn't it? But you left United, my geography wasn't great, and I thought, well, I don't know where it is, and I remember my dad drawing me a map. I had a little Ford Fiesta at the time, and off I went down the M6 and the M5 down to Exeter, and sort of ended up there. Never really come back for about 5 years. So, but yeah, I loved it down there. Loved it down there. Played with some really good players in that scenario as well. And like I say, I think one of the most proudest moments of my short football career was Alan Baller, World Cup winner, wanted you to kind of like represent him and play in his team and stuff like that. So, yeah, amazing memories.
That is really, really amazing. And like we were saying before, you end up loving Exeter. It's a great place. You know where it is on the map now, and
Yeah.
and you got to play under a World Cup winner. What was it like playing for Alan Ball? Was he quite a tough manager, or was he a bit more lenient? What was he like?
Tough, yeah, just like Fergie, really. The winners all they are, they just demand winning. Like if they're not winning, they want to know why. But which I think when Bowley rocked up at Exeter kind of not renowned really for like challenging for titles or anything like that. And I think all Bowley's remit was just to sort of keep them in leagues. Like the Exeter won the old fourth division, which would be League Two now, and then they got promoted to the old third division, which would be League One now. And they managed to kind of stay in there for a few seasons. I think that was Bowley's remit, just trying to keep them in like the old Division 3, like League One level. And but yeah, we had our moments. Ollie played in a couple of, I played in a Devon derby, got the man of the match in that, which was great, and managed to play. I managed to have a really good game. I got man of the match away at Stoke City. So I always laugh to people and say, if you ever got invited onto Sky Sports or anything, and you have like on the underlay where it says, like Jamie Carragher, 700 and odd appearances, 2 European Cups, blah, 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 all the lists. On mine, it'd say, Alan Tonge, man of the match, Stoke City away, on a cold, windy, wet, muddy night. That'd be my overlay. I think I conquered football getting something like that. Because that's supposed to be the measure of a player, isn't it, whether you can do it at Stoke.
Well, there you go. And everyone asks, can Lionel Messi do it on a cold, wet Tuesday night in Stoke? We'll never know, but we know Alan Tonge can.
Alan Tonge can play number 10 as well, so the same shirt.
Exactly. So
yeah, brilliant.
What we're saying really is you've done something that the greatest footballer of all time will never do. So that you should put that on your overlay on Sky Sports. But it's funny you mentioned the Devon derby where you got man of the match. It's fitting we're doing this podcast now in December. That was actually in Boxing Day.
Yeah, it was an early 11 o'clock kickoff in the morning. Obviously for policing and stuff like that, so they wouldn't allow fans to sort of get like. Obviously, they're probably carrying a little bit of a hangover after Christmas Day, but it was 11 o'clock kickoff that morning, and it was an interesting game. I think Paulie had just like wound us up all week about the importance of derby games and making sure that you won them, to send the supporters home happy. And we managed to have the best of it on that day, and that was probably one of my highlights, or probably not if the highlight of my short football career. And it's always nice. As somebody sent me a couple of weeks ago, like because it was Exeter played Plymouth in a Devon derby on Sky, as we said, and I had like somebody sent me the West Country News, like couple of minutes footage from that game with like the bit of commentary on it and stuff like that, which was never seen it before. I love stuff like that, or like people send you a picture or a bit of footage, or so I love that when that arrives, even 30, 35 years on. I always think, wow, I've never seen that before. That's incredible, and that was really nice to watch and observe and bring back some lovely memories.
That's amazing, because I think it was one of the goals you showed me. Did you put a cross in? Was that in that game?
Yeah, so that was it. I think I've shown you a couple of weeks ago that West Country footage. It might have been on the afternoon of the Devon derby that night, actually.
Yeah.
And that was a sort of crossing for the first goal, and then we managed to get a second goal. We got a 2-0 victory. And yeah, that was a nice Boxing Day memory from many years ago. And yeah, I got man of the match in that game as well, so I put a good shift in. But there was a player Bawley had identified. He used to be a good pro actually, called Warren Joyce. He played for Preston, Stoke City, Burnley, Plymouth, of course, and like Bawley sort of identified him, Ollie, as like he's going to be the main problem today, and he needs to be kept quiet. Yeah. I'm surprised in modern coaching that coaches don't use this strategy a lot more. You know, like say for example, you've got, I don't know, like a top player, say a Fernandes at United. You just go and follow him around, like, and keep him out the game because everything goes through him, or you could identify somebody at Man City, you know, like when De Bruyne was pulling the strings. Take him out of the equation, and you'll disrupt everybody. I promise you. Yeah. And I'm surprised a lot of other teams don't look at that strategy, because in first teams, even at the top level, Premier League, there always seems to be like that extra special player that a lot of the play goes through. And common sense tells you all if you keep them quiet, you're going to disrupt the situation, and you know you might be able to exploit other areas because psychologically, if you see your best player not at it because he's being shadowed everywhere, maybe like the heart of other players drops a little bit and think, not too sure if we fancy this today now because our leader's not taking us through. And so yeah, so that was the kind of story of the Devon derby. You don't let Warren Joyce have a kick. And I seen him a few years ago. I managed to I got shown around Carrington, you know, like a look round the training facility, and he was one of the youth coaches at Man United. And I said, do you remember the Boxing Day derby, Warren, from '92? And yeah, he was having a little bit of a reminisce about it and a laugh about it. But yeah, he was a good player, Warren Joyce, and like one of them players that warranted like you need to keep him quiet today if we're going to try and get anything out of this game.
That's amazing, and it's an interesting perspective as well because you see so much about like tactics being such a big part of the game these days, but sometimes the most simple tactics get overlooked, I think, a little bit. You know, like you say, if you take Kevin De Bruyne out, sometimes, and maybe I'm not advocating for this necessarily, but you know, if it's when it was Blues Villa a few years ago, that kind of thing, we were all just like, take Grealish out, you know.
Yeah.
Take him out. Do. Don't let it be a problem for you.
You got half a chance of winning it. Yeah.
Yeah, but so you had a wonderful time at Exeter. You got to play under a World Cup winner. Your career, unfortunately, came to an end at the age of 24 due to a back injury, I believe. Could you talk us through that? What that's like? Obviously, it's got to be gutting.
Yeah, it was. I've started to get. I think the football culture back then was like, it's almost like don't show anyone you're hurt and all that, and like you've got to, like, if you get smashed down, bounce back up again and stuff like that. But I was starting to get like pins and needles in my legs and my feet, and I thought I was stupid. I thought, oh, it'll be all right. It'll just die down eventually. And then I kept playing with it. And I remember playing in a game. It was away at Swansea City, and I don't know why I didn't tell the manager about it or like speak up about it. I don't know where my headspace was then. And I remember saying to my mate, like at the time, it was like called Dave Cooper, like in the dressing room. I said, I'm really struggling to, like, Coops. I said, I can hardly move. I mean, my biomechanics are not great. And he said, Ball's like done all set pieces and all that, and like you can't tell him now. And I thought, oh, I better just try and get through it. And I remember getting a load of DP, which was like a sort of a white can. I don't know if you still get it these days. You can get it in a tube. It's for like different things that you might have just to get a bit of warmth on there. So I remember like squeezing all this cream, rubbing it all over my back and thinking, oh, I'll just get through it. Anyway, after that game, I had to sort of say to the physio, look, I'm really struggling. So they sent me for a scan, and they said, like, oh, your spine's in like a really bad way. The pins and needles, like my discs had slipped. And in certain movements, like when you was kind of like running or jumping or tackling, like when it was sliding, it was touching on your spinal nerves, and that's what all the tingling was. And the surgeon at the time, a lad called Stephen Gill at French Aid, Bristol, he said if you'd have had one bad tackle, that could have severed your spinal nerves in half. Yeah, you would have been in a wheelchair. And I remember thinking to myself, Ollie, when I heard that, I thought, what the hell was I not doing, say, at Bawley? I'm struggling today, I can't make this because my back's really sore, or I can't go through with it. I don't know where my psychology was at the time. I was probably trying to chase another contract, or thinking if I come out the first team, I'm going to struggle to get back into the first team environment. So you make stupid decisions in life at times, and that was probably one of them. But yeah, it led unfortunately that led to my career getting finished early, and I had to have screws and plates in my back that are still in there. So yeah, I beep every time I go through airport terminals. Like walking through the scanners. So they must still pick up the metal work in there. So yes, that was it. That was the finish of me. I couldn't get back from it. Surgeon advised me, you're not going to be training full time now and playing and all that. So it was a real sad moment hearing that. And I've got a letter from the PFA that sort of identifies like when it happened, and can you release like the Football League insurance money to Alan Tonge? And that's probably the saddest letter that ever dropped through my door. So yes, that was the end of my football career. I think I was around, like you say, about 23 and a half, something like that, heading towards 24 years old, all done.
Yeah, and it is a really tough experience, and a lot of players' careers end for a variety of reasons, injury like yourself, and sometimes it is because they can't get back into the first team, or as we talked about earlier in the youth setup, they get released or whatever it may be. You luckily, as we've kind of through this podcast gone on, you had this sort of backup of the BTEC and eventually the university degree. So as tough as it was at the time, you seem to have this plan going forward. And so talk us through that. What was you thinking after you're out of football?
Well, again, similar to Man United experience, the phone doesn't ring again. I tried to get a little bit of support. A lad called Eamon Dolan, who was the academy manager at Reading, he sadly died young, Eamon. Fantastic fella. He gave me some hours coaching in the football in the community scheme, as it was back then, Ollie. But unfortunately, the difficulty I had then was it was only seasonal, so you just get like summer work or Easter, Christmas camps, whatever it was, and it wasn't enough to sustain, like a full-time wage coming in. So I had to have like a serious reflective think about like what am I going to do next. And like I say, I had a bit of a year or two where I was kind of like a little bit probably lost. It's probably the best way to explain it. Yeah. And then I ended up going back to do a degree, like yourself at the moment, or following an academic journey. So I was 28 when I did that. So I had a few years out of football, doing a couple of bits and pieces here and there. And then I went back to university to do a sports science degree. And that was kind of the start of my life kind of taking another direction. So I finished my degree, and then I did, because I enjoyed this experience and observing some of the lecturers in action, I thought to myself, I think I could probably carve a career in that myself. So I did my teacher training straight away. And then, like I said, I got my first job was in a college doing BTEC work, delivering to 16 to 18-year-olds. Again, just carved a good bit of experience there and created a bit of a foundation for myself. And then, as I was going through my teaching, I sort of picked up a master's degree in philosophy as well. So I did that part-time, and then that led to, again, that led onto a PhD, sort of like doing some writing about first-team players and their experiences within footballer settings, and whether, a football identity affects your mental health, your psychology, the way you think. So I wrote that, and I graduated with a PhD as well. So probably the first 25 years of my life was probably like football, really football driven. And then the second sort of like 25 in a way have been more moving towards education, teaching, learning, working with young people like yourself, Ollie. And seeing you guys do well as well. I think that's one of the amazing kind of like experience that I would probably never had if I'd have stayed in football. And that is getting the opportunity to attend graduations, to meet families, and to see young people really making a difference in the world of sport, whether that's in coaching or the media or business or management or leadership, whichever direction you guys take. That's really inspiring as well. So I think that's it with education. It's not about I'm telling you what to do or you're doing it all yourself. It's about connection. It's about building something that, you maybe feel as though you're making a difference to a young person's life. And I think that's probably maybe a hole that I filled in by thinking, well, I never really got that, and I know how much it hurts. So trying to get that kind of connection with young people and help them and move them forwards and give them platforms to grow. I'd have never had that experience if my football would have worked out. So, you sort of look at, out of darkness comes light, Ollie, a lot of the time.
And it is brilliant, and I could tell you firsthand you're doing a great job at it from my perspective. So thank you for that. And I think that's really important for people to hear as well. Listening to this, like I said, this is kind of just find out about people's careers, but also to maybe give advice on how people can break into the football industry. But sometimes within that industry, or whether it's external to that, you can't give up on yourself. You've just got to find that pathway, what makes you feel that you're giving value to yourself and to those around you, maybe. And you've definitely found that through academia, and now you are Dr. Alan Tonge as well through your PhD, which is brilliant. And you've had a long career, 22 years, and now you're a senior lecturer in football and research at UCFB, the University Campus of Football Business, for people who don't know. But you're also an author, as I alluded to in the introduction. You published the book From Red to Read, the story of Fergie's first fledgling. What was that like, writing and publishing a book?
Yeah, it was just something that I thought about. I contacted a friend of mine, Michael Garvey, who kind of helped write it. And I said to Michael, do you think there's enough here for a tale, a story, something a bit different? And so he wrote a book for an old United player called John O'Kane. John had a decent career, played at United first team, got into Everton's first team, went to Bolton. John did really well. And he said, I said, I think so. He said, you've got your United tales, you've got Exeter tales, you've got coming out of football, you've got injury, you've got your sort of academic journey. And he said, there might be something that we can put together. So we met Mike for months and months at coffee shops, and we go through the first stage, apprentice or youths, and then into United, and then into Exeter, and you kind of your different bits and pieces. And so that sort of got onto the market. I think it was April last year, so we've had about 18 months of that being available. And it was my mum. It was my mum, because I was thinking about a title about all sorts of titles, all the Nearly Man, or what else we were saying. Halfway to Paradise, stuff like that. And my mum said, well, you've had, obviously, you play for Exeter and Man United, so there's the red, element of that. And then the second part of the text, the other red, is your academic, because you'll know yourself, or when you graduate, you'll become a red person because you've got your degree in that, and you might want to do masters or even yourself a PhD. So in the academic world, you're known as being well read. So that from red to red is kind of how the title come together. So yes, I've had a lot of good feedback, and different people who've read it said they enjoyed the honesty, the openness, the integrity that's in there about being raw, but not being too finger pointy and critical and bitter and stuff like that. We didn't want any of that in there.
No.
But just making points, I think, here and there where I felt it was needed around lack of support and the pain of that, and how that can impact a human being and with relation to their mental health. So just little chapter pointers here and there in relation to that. So yes, that was good. And I've also had a couple of academic journals published as well, just recently, a week or two ago, with my colleagues Tom Buck and Gary Sauter. We've had an article published about, again, similar, ex-professional footballer and how their identity was shaped and changed and challenged as they had a really full career. Just looking maybe to do a little bit more in that space over the sort of the next period. That's something that'll probably be on my agenda as 2026 kicks in. I'd also like to try and get more into the applied world, Ollie. I think if you're going to shift myself in a direction, I'd like to do more working clubs. I think that I've had like a sort of an overview of what I'd like to bring on your notes on your iPhone, like the notes page.
Yeah,
I've had that sat there for ages, and it's ready to go. And it's just to sort of like see if anybody wants to bring in a sort of a psychologist, chartered psychologist at first team level, not necessarily Premier League Championship or anything like that, but maybe down League One, League Two, maybe National League North. Anybody who's kind of within an hour of Bolton or 45 minutes of Bolton, I could maybe do some support work, educate some of the people in there. I could work with some of the players in relation to their psychology. So that's probably going to be something that I'm going to be looking at to do in the new year. So that's probably an ambition of mine that's on the horizon. And then just other things. I do bits and pieces of charity work for Manchester Mind. The mental health charity is close to my heart because of some of the experience I've had. So I'm going to be dressing up as Santa Claus.
amazing.
In against Bolton 1 Exeter to come up to Bolton on the 13th of December. So a week on Saturday. So I'm going to be decked out in my Santa Claus outfit, and they've had some great contributions to my Just Giving page already. I think we're sat at about like 815 quid at the moment. So if I could get that to £1,000, that'd be incredible. And nice little bit of charity work there. I've organised a golf day for Manchester Mind a year or two ago. Managed to raise over £3,000 for that. So just little bits and pieces just to keep you occupied and keep you moving in a positive direction. I think that's really important for all of us, isn't it? Finding that element of purpose and meaning, and hopefully making a difference to someone in some small way.
That's brilliant. I love that, especially the charity work. It's a great thing to do. So I'll put in the description for anyone who's interested in reading Alan's book, From Red to Red. I think you've watched him. It's been a great episode. Really enjoyed talking to you. And for any further details for anyone who's interested, we'll drop that in there. Alan, I always end videos now the same way. What's one piece of advice you'd give for anyone who's looking to break into the football or sports industry?
One bit of advice. I think it's tough. We know football's not easy. It's difficult because, like I said earlier in the podcast, the data tells us that it's like really, really, really small percentages of young players who manage to get a career out of it. So, but what I'd probably say is make sure that as you're going through your journey, you're devoting and thinking about other things you can do as well. Not to take your concentration or your desire to play professional football away from you, because you can do that as well. But you can make up your identity in different ways. You could just be as committed to being a footballer. You can be committed to being an academic. You can be committed to being a parent, a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a brother, a sister. All these different components that kind of need attention to sort of make sure that you've got something called a full holistic identity. A lot of young players, they just give everything to football, don't they? And like say, when it doesn't work out, it puts them in a really difficult spot. Then, I could vouch for that because I'm coming through United and Exeter, etc. Especially, the Exeter situation, because I kind of give my education up. I was kind of nothing but a footballer. But when your kind of football doesn't work out and you face that moment where you come out of the game and you have to say, who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? If you don't know that, you're susceptible then to mental health challenges. So that'd probably be my main one, Ollie. As you're going through your journey in football, even if you're a young 9-year-old, even if you're an apprentice, even if you're a young pro, try and get other interests within your life as well. They don't have to be academic. You could learn different languages. You can do different things. Give your attention to maybe setting up a foundation or working with, young disabled people maybe on an afternoon, or anything to enrich your life in a little bit more, with a little bit more purpose, and keep your feet grounded as well. Keep your feet on the floor, because it's a tough journey. And I remember the great boxing trainer Brendan Ingle saying, this is a good piece of advice: be kind to people on your way up, because you'll meet them again on your way back down. And I think that's so true. That's maybe a nice way to end the podcast, Ollie.
I think that's
don't get carried away and be thinking that you missed a big, because unfortunately, life has a sort of a nasty way of smacking you in the face when you're running at your fastest. So yeah, some nice words there from Brendan Ingle, the young boxing trainer, to finish.
I love that. Great piece of advice. A few inspirational quotes thrown in there. And as you say, add some strings to your bow, whatever it may be, whatever interests you may find or develop. There's always going to be something out there for everyone else. So I just want to say a huge thank you, Dr. Alan Tonge, for coming on to the podcast. Really appreciate you spending your time and giving a real insight into football from different perspectives, for sure.
Thank you, Ollie. Thanks for inviting me on. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
My pleasure. To those out there, thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time for the next video.